Please enjoy this story. If you like it, remember to leave a comment below and subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this one. The late day sunlight filtered through the Venetian blinds, creating alternating bands of light and shadow across my living room carpet. It was the kind of quiet weekday when the softest sound was the steady cadence of the antique timepiece in the hallway. A rhythm that usually brought me comfort, but today seemed to merely count away hours I wasn't quite sure how to fill. My children had grown and scattered across the country, building lives of their own, and since William departed this world several seasons ago, the house often echoed with emptiness, too spacious and too silent. I had just finished my now cool chamomile and was contemplating whether to tend the flower beds or surrender to a brief rest when I heard the distinctive engine of Patricia Miller's vehicle next door. Patricia and Robert were wonderful neighbors, reliable for borrowing baking ingredients or watching over the house during my absences. I knew their youngest, Daniel, was visiting. He was a professional architect residing somewhere along the eastern seaboard. Over holiday gatherings through the years, I'd observed him courteous but reserved, always appearing somewhat adrift in his thoughts. Later that evening, the neighborhood committee was hosting its yearly midsummer gathering at the local park. Typically, I'd prepare my signature dish, engage in casual conversation for a while, then make my exit. It was part of the suburban custom. Tonight felt somehow different, though. Perhaps it was the lingering stillness of the afternoon, or simply the desire for human interaction that wasn't filtered through a screen. I decided to attend. The park buzzed with activity, children playing noisily, adults clustered around tables laden with dishes, the air heavy with barbecue aromas and citrus candles. I found an unoccupied bench near the gathering's edge, beneath the shade of a sprawling maple. I had just situated my plate of pasta and grilled chicken on my lap when a shadow fell across me. "Would you mind some company? The tables seem quite full." It was Daniel Miller, gesturing vaguely toward the crowded area with a gentle, almost hesitant smile. "Please join me," I replied, shifting slightly. "Plenty of space here." He settled beside me, carefully balancing his own plate. He wasn't the slender youth I vaguely recalled. He'd matured, his shoulders broader beneath a simple charcoal shirt. Fine creases appeared around his eyes when he smiled, eyes that were a remarkable shade of amber, like autumn leaves in sunlight. We sat quietly for several moments, comfortably listening to the cheerful commotion surrounding us. I noticed his hand's elegant fingers, well-kept nails, the kind that appeared equally at home sketching building designs or perhaps playing a stringed instrument. He caught my glance and tucked them slightly away, a faint flush rising along his neck. The gesture was endearing. "Your mother's cheesy casserole is quite renowned," I offered, breaking our silence. He laughed, a pleasant sound, rich and authentic. "Indeed, she protects that recipe fiercely. I've been attempting to extract it from her for ages. Some treasures are best kept mysterious." I smiled. "Adds to their charm," he nodded, taking a bite of the casserole. "So," he began after a moment, "you're Elinor, correct? My parents mention you." "That's me," I confirmed. "And you're Daniel, the wandering son returns." He chuckled warmly, something like that. Just needed respite from the city rush. Thought familiar surroundings and mother's cooking might help. There was a weariness underlying his voice that hadn't been present moments before, a subtle weight pulling at his expression's corners. This glimpse beneath his polite exterior was unexpected. Our conversation flowed easily afterward. Nothing particularly profound neighborhood changes. The absurdity of the association's recent regulations about garden decorations. He shared an amusing tale about his cat in Boston. I recounted my daughter's recent culinary mishap. The exchange was uncomplicated, yet beneath it ran a curious current. Not flirtation in the conventional sense, but recognition, a sense of truly seeing someone, and perhaps being seen in return, in a manner both unfamiliar and welcome. He didn't regard me as merely his parents' neighbor, a woman of certain years passing time at a community gathering. He looked at me as though I were interesting, engaging in my own right, and perhaps I viewed him differently too, not just as Patricia's son, but as a thoughtful individual with kind eyes and quiet depth. The sun began its descent, casting extended shadows across the grass, painting the horizon in warm copper and lavender. The crowd thinned as families collected their belongings and shepherded tired children homeward. Daniel made no move to leave, and neither did I. He began speaking about his profession, the pressures, the sensation of being insignificant within a massive enterprise. It wasn't complaining, more a quiet reflection. Sometimes I question what it all means, he said, gazing toward the darkening playground. You design these intricate structures, these elaborate blueprints, but does it truly matter? It was a question I'd often pondered myself, especially in the quiet hours since William's passing. What purpose did the precisely folded linens serve, the meticulously tended flowers, the perfectly balanced accounts? I believe, I said carefully, choosing my words, that meaning resides less in grand scales and more in small connections. The buildings you design shelter people, bring communities together, create spaces for lives to unfold. That holds significance. He turned toward me, his amber eyes searching mine in the fading light. You think so? I do, I affirmed, just like this conversation. It's not changing the world, but perhaps it's making this corner of existence feel slightly less solitary for a moment. That matters too. A slow smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes fully this time. Yes, he exhaled softly. Yes, I suppose it does. We remained as darkness settled completely, the earliest stars beginning to appear in the twilight. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of freshly mown grass and evening dew. The easy silence returned, but now it felt charged, filled with unspoken understanding. It was the sensation of discovering an unexpected haven in a simple exchange beneath an old maple tree. The subsequent days passed in a pleasant, slightly altered rhythm. I would see Daniel walking his parents' aging Labrador, working on his father's vintage truck, or simply sitting on their veranda with his computer. We'd exchange waves, occasionally chat briefly over the fence about the weather or the stubborn weeds invading my flower beds. Each small interaction felt like adding another brushstroke to an unexpected canvas. There existed an ease between us, a naturalness that felt refreshing. One particularly hot afternoon, I was struggling with a heavy bag of garden soil, the plastic cutting into my fingers painfully. Suddenly, Daniel appeared jogging across the lawn. "Need assistance with that, Elinor?" he asked, already reaching for the bag. "Oh, Daniel, thank you. This weighs terribly." I sighed gratefully. He lifted it effortlessly, carrying it to the flower bed I was tending. "No trouble at all. Looks like you're undertaking serious garden work here." "Attempting to," I sighed, wiping perspiration from my brow. "These flowers are more demanding than my children were as youngsters." He laughed, setting the soil down carefully. "My mother says exactly that about her dahlias." He lingered, leaning against the maple that shaded my yard. "Actually, he said, looking down at his hands then back at me. I was wondering. I'm trying to resolve an unusual problem in a personal design project, and honestly, discussing it sometimes helps. My parents' eyes glaze when I mention architectural terms. Would you? I mean, no obligation, but would you mind just listening briefly? Sometimes explaining aloud makes the solution appear. I was surprised but touched. I know absolutely nothing about architecture, Daniel. I warned, smiling. But I'm an excellent listener. Find yourself a seat. He retrieved one of the outdoor chairs from my porch and sat across from me under the dappled shade. He opened his laptop, the screen illuminating his features softly. He began explaining, using comparisons I could grasp, likening structural elements to cooking recipes, design functions to specific kitchen tools. He spoke passionately, his initial reservation replaced by focused enthusiasm. I didn't comprehend the technical aspects, of course, but I understood the frustration in his voice describing the design flaw, the intellectual puzzle he was tackling. I listened attentively, asking occasional, probably naive questions, attempting to follow his reasoning. He never made me feel unintelligent for not understanding. He simply rephrased patiently or found different analogies. After roughly 20 minutes, he suddenly paused, studied his screen, typed rapidly for a moment, then leaned back with a relieved sigh. Wait, I think yes, that's it. Discussing the entrance flow sequence when you asked why it needed that specific orientation. It made me realize I'd positioned it in the completely wrong section. He looked up at me, a wide, incredulous grin spreading across his face. Eleanor, you're brilliant. I laughed, shaking my head. Hardly. I merely asked a question. No, but you listened. He insisted, eyes bright. Truly listened. Nobody does that anymore, not really. Everyone's simply waiting for their turn to speak or checking their devices. He closed the laptop. Thank you, sincerely. Anytime, I said genuinely, though I can't promise any useful insights next time. Just listening is valuable, he repeated softly. We sat longer, our earlier ease returning, deepened now by this shared moment of problem. Solving, however one-sided the actual solution might have been. He began asking about my life before William, my career in museum conservation, an aspect of my past I rarely discussed anymore. He seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions. I found myself opening up, sharing stories long unvisited, recalling the satisfaction of preserving delicate historical artifacts, the peaceful atmosphere of the restoration rooms. It felt wonderful to revisit that part of myself, to see it reflected in someone else's interested gaze. The afternoon shadows lengthened as the heat began to soften. There was a comfortable intimacy in our conversation, a quiet sharing beneath the shade of the old tree. It felt like uncovering layers, not just within each other, but within ourselves. Several evenings later, Patricia mentioned they were planning a small outdoor dinner, just family, before Daniel returned to Boston in a few days. You absolutely must join us, Eleanor, she insisted. Keep us older folks company while Daniel discusses building designs or whatever occupies him. I hesitated only briefly before accepting. The prospect of spending another evening in Daniel's thoughtful company was surprisingly appealing. The gathering was relaxed. Just Patricia, Robert, Daniel, and myself on their back patio. Robert grilled food, Patricia fussed over accompaniments, and Daniel appeared more at ease than I'd seen him, laughing readily at his father's terrible jokes. As evening deepened, Robert and Patricia went inside to tidy up, leaving Daniel and me alone outside, quietly enjoying our beverages. The garden torches cast dancing shadows, and the aroma of grilled dishes mingled with the sweet fragrance of Patricia's evening blossoms. "You know, Elinor," Daniel said, breaking our comfortable silence, "that conversation we had the other day under your tree." I nodded, watching the lightning bugs beginning to appear in the garden. It meant considerably to me. He continued, voice low, "It's been a strange few years for me. Work, life, everything felt somewhat empty. Coming back here, I expected little beyond nostalgia and decent meals." He paused, swirling the ice in his glass. "But talking with you, it's different. You don't attempt to solve things or offer cliches. You simply listen, and you perceive things." I turned to look at him, his profile outlined against the soft glow from the house, his expression serious, vulnerable. "Perhaps it's because I'm at a stage where I value genuine connection more than easy answers," I said softly. "Life teaches that hollow reassurances quickly wear thin." He met my gaze, his amber eyes appearing very deep in the torchlight. "You make things feel less empty." The air between us suddenly felt charged, thick with unspoken emotion. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was potent, the culmination of shared glances, quiet conversations, unexpected moments of understanding. There existed a magnetic pull, a recognition of shared solitude perhaps, or simply a profound, unexpected empathy. He leaned forward slightly, his hand resting on the armrest between us. I could feel warmth radiating from him, my heart beating faster, a forgotten rhythm. This was uncharted territory. He was my neighbor's son. I was significantly older. Yet the connection felt authentic, untainted by those labels, existing purely in the space between us under the jasmine-scented sky. It was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. He didn't move closer, didn't break the gaze. His eyes held a question, but also deep respect. It wasn't predatory, as sometimes seen in men regardless of age. It was open, uncertain, almost reverent. In that moment I felt truly seen, not as a widow, a neighbor, or an older woman, but as myself. Elinor, a person with her own history, her own quiet strength, her own capacity for connection. He reached out very slowly, and his fingertips brushed against the back of my hand resting on the chair arm. It wasn't quite a caress. It was a point of contact, electric and grounding simultaneously. A spark, faint but definite, passed between us. My breath caught. I didn't withdraw. I couldn't. His touch lingered for just a heartbeat, a silent acknowledgement of the energy flowing between us. Then, just as slowly, he withdrew his hand, his gaze dropping momentarily before meeting mine again, a faint smile touching his lips, tinged with gentle sadness. "My departure is scheduled for the weekend," he said softly, the words hanging in the air. Reality intruded, gentle but firm. This connection, intense and unexpected as it was, existed within the framework of our separate lives. He lived across the country, belonged to a different generation, his path stretching forward while mine felt more settled, quieter. "I know," I replied, my voice equally soft. No further words were needed. The moment itself, that brief touch, the shared look was the crescendo, an emotional peak defined by its restraint, its unspoken depth, its mutual respect. It wasn't about pursuing something impossible or inappropriate. It was about acknowledging the beauty of a connection found in the most unexpected circumstances. It was a shared secret held in the space between two people on a warm summer evening. We sat silently for additional minutes, the intensity gradually receding, replaced by a warm, bittersweet calm. When Patricia and Robert returned, the spell was broken, but its memory remained imprinted on the evening air. Daniel left 2 days later. We said goodbye politely at his parents' driveway. A simple handshake, a shared look that held the weight of our unspoken moments. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, "for everything." "Safe travels, Daniel," I replied. "Visit your parents again soon." As his car disappeared down the street, I didn't feel exactly sad. Instead, I felt enriched. The quiet house didn't seem quite so empty. The ticking clock didn't sound quite so lonely. That brief, unexpected connection with Daniel hadn't altered the fundamental circumstances of my life, but it had shifted something within me. It reminded me that emotional intimacy could blossom in surprising places, that vulnerability was strength, and that being truly seen, even briefly, was a profound gift. It was a reminder that life, even in its quiet middle chapters, could still hold moments of startling, unexpected beauty and connection. I returned inside, prepared a fresh cup of tea, and sat by the window, watching the afternoon sunlight filter through the blinds. The stripes on the carpet looked different, somehow brighter, more alive with possibility.